Alright, so I was going to do a video on Roley and Adrianna, like how to do this event, guys, and figured best thing to do would be to zone in here and just show you guys how to do it. So basically you come in here, this is a mirror image of the actual Demiplane. This is DSK though, so stuff isn't aggro or anything. You'd kill these that are dancers, and once you kill all the dancers on the last one that dies, Roley and Adrianna will spawn out here about in the middle of the room, about right here. And what you will want to do is you will want to tank Adrianna about right here. So on the map, to give you an idea, that's about right here on the west wall would be my recommendation. And then I would tank Roley probably over here on the east, right where I'm standing. And then on Roley, one thing important is to have your tank stand like if this was Roley right here, the wolf, you'd have your tank stand on this side of him. And you also want to pull a little bit towards me, so like right in front of me is where you want Roley. And then your tank, the reason I say that is because later on you're going to be summon tanking, and you want to be able to back towards your healers. A lot of times, I don't know why, but tanks will go, I guess because they see the wall, they tank on this side, and they're out of range and they die. So have your tank stand on this side, and then that way they can back up towards the healers once we get him perma-rooted. So step one is to position your fight. And so you'd have Adrianna, west side, Roley, east side. Now, why do you want Adrianna on the west side? Well, because if you do the strat that I'm going to show you, you will pull the lab mobs to the raid, and that's through that door. Whenever it's the lab, you're going to pull a rotting zombie up from there and you're going to kill it, and that puts your raid close in proximity to where they're going to be. And you're not training over people. So yeah, that's why I say to keep her on the west, and anywhere over here is really fine. And then, yeah, so that's what you're going to do there. That's how you position it. Other key notes before I start to explain the rest of it is to get out of combat in this fight, if you ever have somebody who needs to drop combat because they need to loot a stake and they, for whatever reason, they messed up and got on the aggro table, one thing they can do is they can run out whichever way you cleared. You'll run all the way out this way, and they'll click this door right here. And if they just stand here and wait until they get the hourglass up in the top right, you know, they lose the cross swords and they get the hourglass, that means they're out of combat. And then they will be, after standing here for a couple moments, that'll happen. Then they can click back in the door and they can run back over the raid and they'll be able to loot their stake. That's kind of worst case scenario though. You don't want to be in that position, but it is an option. For example, if you needed like a warrior to loot one, but he can't because in combat, that would be a solution. Okay, so that's the setup of the fight. Let's go into like phase 2. So the next part of this fight, the hardest part, is really just understanding the mechanics of looting the stakes and how the show phase works with Adrianna. Let's start off by the stakes, explaining them. Basically, the way it works is Roley, every 10% of his health, you'll have to restake him, and that's how you unlock the next like health block of, you know, every 10% you stake, and then you take him down 10%, and then you stake him. So for this strat to work, what we're going to do is we're actually going to stake him at 90, and then we're going to let him regen back up to like 100, and we're just going to keep collecting stakes while he's regenning, and then we're just going to have all the stakes ready, and then we're going to stake him down every 10% and kind of burn him down all at once at the end. But for this to work, we're going to explain the Banes real quick, or clicky stakes, however, whatever you want to call them. And you have 3 different types. Your 3 different types are going to be dropped in 3 different areas. They're specific to these areas, which took me a little while to like figure out. And I definitely messed this up in the beginning of my raids. I would have all these people out of combat, like waiting to join the fight that really didn't need to wait. So let's say first you have the lab, which drops the Paladin, Shadow Knight, and Berserker Bane. Paladin, Shadow Knight, and Berserker, because it drops in the lab, which is off a mob and not a chest, they don't have to worry about being out of combat. They can loot that while in combat. So your master looter can loot them to them while they're in combat as long as they're like in range, which is super easy because you're actually pulling the lab. For this strat, you'll be pulling the lab to the raid. Focus DPS on the zombie, and then the other mobs will despawn once the loot is handed out. So you just have to off tank the other mobs. So Paladin, Shadow Knight, Berserkers don't have to worry about the combat thing. The other stake, this one drops in the Crypt, is the Monk and Beast Lord one. Monks obviously can drop out of combat super easy. Beast Lords, I don't even know if they really exist. It's like a mythical creature at this point, kind of like a unicorn. But if you do have a unicorn in your raid, you'd want to make sure that they don't end up on the Roley table. So that means that they don't attack Roley, they don't cast anything on Roley, and they don't do anything on Roley until you actually are in your main burn phase. So that first 10% when you take them down, they would just stand on the sidelines and not. They would only DPS Adrianna and nothing to do with Roley. Next is a Splintering Oak stake, and this is the trickiest one that messes the most people up because these classes have a hard time dropping out of combat. You have a Warrior, Ranger, Bard, and Rogue. Some Rogues, they're smart enough, they can drop combat pretty easily. But you don't have a lot of rogues really, and you got to loot like 8 of these stakes, and I recommend doing 9 to have an extra one. Warriors, if you're not the one tanking Roley, and then I would not attack Roley until you're in your main burn phase, and that way you stay off Roley's aggro table and you're always eligible for a stake. So if you're a warrior, don't attack Roley in that 10%, the first 10%, like just don't attack him at all until you're on the final phase. And that way you're always good. You'll be out of combat every time Adrianna goes into the show phase. You should drop off aggro, and you should be good to loot a stake. Same with Rangers. Same with Bards. Bards are a little tricky because your songs hit your group, so you got to be really careful about that. So I would recommend using Warriors and Rangers, especially Rangers, and also Rogues to loot these. The Master Looter will always want to make sure they have 1 or 2 people in the queue ready to loot these stakes so that they don't have to like bumble around with it, because you got to remember, as soon as you loot the stake, the mobs despawn, and it helps your monk get out of that area. It also helps the mobs that you pull from the lab despawn, so the quicker you get it picked up, the better. So have these people queued up. Here are a photo of your 3 stake types and the people who can loot them. The classes are listed there underneath them. I'll also put this in the description of the video. So that's kind of like the explaining the Banes and the clickies. Alright, so the actual fight, this is phase 3. You're gonna, once this fight I guess starts, you will DPS Adrianna down. She will say show. You will send your monk with the little hotkey to target the chest. To break it, he will FD, and then your looter will hand out the stake. Once he hands out the stake, you're going to go over for the first one, and you're going to DPS Roley to 90. Once Roley's at 90, you stake him. And remember, if you're a Warrior, Ranger, or Bard, or Rogue, probably don't attack him for the first 10%. I mean, Rogues you can if you know how to drop. But Warriors and Rangers do not attack Roley for the first 10%. And then once he gets down 90, you stake him down. You're going to let Roley regen back up to 100, and you're just going to summon tank him. And at this point, you're just going to be DPSing Adrianna down and getting her to say show and sending your monk up to break open chest, and you're just going to keep looting out stakes to people. If it ends up being the lab, you'll have a Shadow Knight or Bard pull the lab mobs up to the raid through that door, and you can just focus your energy on killing the rotting zombie. And once you kill the rotting zombie, the stake will be lootable to a Knight class or a Berserker. And you can just, they don't have to worry about the combat thing because it drops off a mob, not a chest. So just loot it to them and that'll cure that up. You'll want to rinse and repeat this. Like I said, I would get 1 extra one, 9, I would say. Even on this last time, like I know how this fight works, and I actually botched one of the clicks on one of the raids. It just happens. Sometimes you're DPSing him so fast, he's just, you're calling names and stuff. For me, I had too many audio triggers go off at the same time, and I just clicked early or something. I don't know. If you do mess up a click, and let's say you have him at 10% and he keeps regenerating the 10% because you missed a click, you can go back to Adrianna and you DPS her down again, and then you send your monk up again or pull the lab mobs up and you get another stake and you know, stake them down and then end the fight. So if you have to go back and get more stakes, it's not the end of the world, but it is kind of a pain. So clean and simple. If you guys have any questions, let me know. Again, it's just a matter of getting Adrianna in her show phase and then sending your monk up to hit the hotkey, break open the chest, and FD. They will also need like cures and heals pretty often. One thing that helps too, if you're a monk, is you know these hotkeys are super important, and also have a backup monk. So if they die, you can send another monk. I also would recommend having a rogue with a library key to open the door, so you can go over there and pull their corpse out if they do die and bring it to the raid to res. Another key notes of this fight, things that can go wrong. Your stakeholders, if they die, they lose their stake. So if you hand one to a warrior and that warrior dies, that stake goes away, so you can't use it. It'll just disappear from the inventory because it's a temporary item. So here's the rest of our Roley Adrianna fight. Put it in a little fast forward mode so you guys can watch it. If you have any questions, let me know. But basically, you're just going to farm those 8 to 9 stakes, and then you're going to get Roley and you'll burn them down and you'll stake them every 10%. Make sure your looter is calling out names like so-and-so is up, and then, you know, they'll stake them, so-and-so, you're up, and then they stake them, you know, so you have an order to that. And also remember every 10% that dropping the aggro so he could attack random people, and if you're a stakeholder, do not die. Again, there are a couple other strats to do this, but this is the best one I have found. Thank you for watching, guys. I know this was a long video. Please like and subscribe and do all that mamma jamma. Thank you. Bye. He said yes. Tank there, are you good for looting a stake if it's a warrior one next? Okay, cool. Do we have a bard, warrior, ranger person who's ready or no? Okay. Alright, Gelatin's ready. Swasis as well, cool. Gelatin's ready too. Oh, okay. How many do we have so far? Alright, cool. So 2 more. We'll do 1 extra. Big's good. I know. I get like, I have to figure out how to fix my trigger so I don't get that dot message, because it just blasts in my ear the whole time that you have darkness whatever dot. Zombie, someone pull that zombie up to us. Yeah, mobs don't despawn. There we go. Is that enough? We need 1 more for the extra. Alright, so guys, stop damaging her. Let's all go damage Roley. Koosh will call out your name when the stake. Save your burns. Doing Triss next. Perfect. Alright, for Banes, let me check.